You think family support means casseroles and a spare blanket. In my case, it meant my little sister waltzing back into the house I kept afloat for 5 years, and my mother telling me to move into the basement or get out. They thought I would beg. Instead, I walked away and took every invisible thing I provided with me. By the time they realized what I actually did, they were sitting in the dark with bills they could not even read. My name is Phoebe Brooks, and I am 29 years old. I work as a logistics coordinator for a company called Harborline Logistics. And if you have ever wondered what that job title actually means, it means I spend 10 hours a day screaming internally while calmly explaining to truck drivers why they cannot drop a shipping container in the middle of a residential street. It is a job that requires patience, a high tolerance for chaos, and the ability to function on caffeine and very little sleep. By the time I pulled my sedan into the driveway of the house on Maple Ridge, my bones felt like they were made of lead. My feet were throbbing inside my sensible work shoes, and my brain was a static fuzz of shipping manifests and delivery timetables. All I wanted was a glass of water, a hot shower, and silence. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, immediately bending down to scoop up the mail that had been shoved through the slot. It was a habit, a reflex honed over 5 years of being the only person in this house who cared about due dates. I flipped through the envelopes as I walked down the hallway toward the kitchen. Electric bill, water bill, property tax assessment, a reminder for the internet service. The weight of the paper in my hand was familiar, a tangible representation of the tether that kept this house running. I did not mind it. Usually, it was just what you did. It was how you kept the lights on. I walked into the kitchen, dropping my keys in the little ceramic bowl on the counter. The kitchen was my pride and joy. It was the room where my father and I had spent the most time, back when this place was a wreck. I ran my hand over the cool surface of the quartz countertop. I remembered the day I paid for this slab. It had cost me $3,000, drained from my savings account 2 years ago because my mother, Ellen, had complained that the old laminate was peeling and embarrassing. I had paid for it. I had paid for the installation. I had even paid for the special sealant so it would not stain. But tonight, the kitchen did not feel like mine. The air in the room was thick, heavy with a tension that hit me the moment I crossed the threshold. My mother was leaning against the far counter, her arms crossed over her chest. Her face was unreadable, a mask of cold composure that she usually reserved for telemarketers or neighbors who let their grass grow too long. But it was the other 2 people in the room who made my stomach drop. Sitting on the bar stools, the expensive leather ones I had ordered for my mother's birthday last year, were my younger sister, Madison, and her husband, Trent. Maddie looked perfect. She always did. She was wearing a beige loungewear set that probably cost more than my entire weekly grocery budget, and her hair was blown out in loose, glossy waves. She had that freshly scrubbed, high-maintenance glow that came from expensive facials and never having to wake up at 6 in the morning for a commute. She smiled when she saw me, but it was not a warm smile. It was the smile she used in her apology videos on social media, the one that was practiced, stiff, and didn't quite reach her eyes. Trent was next to her, hunched over a sleek laptop, tapping away at keys that I was fairly certain were not actually doing anything productive. Trent was an entrepreneur, which in our family meant nobody had any idea how he made money, or if he made money at all. He looked up and gave me a nod that was somewhere between dismissive and pitying. "Hey, Phoebe," Maddie said. Her voice was soft, sugary, and laced with danger. "Maddie," I said, still clutching the stack of bills in my left hand. "I didn't know you guys were visiting. How is Lakeshore?" Lakeshore was the trendy city 2 hours away where Maddie and Trent had moved 3 years ago to launch her lifestyle brand and his tech startup. It was the place she constantly posted about, captioning photos of skyline views with quotes about hustling and manifesting abundance. "We are not visiting," Ellen said. Her voice cut through the air like a pair of fabric shears. I looked from my mother to my sister. Maddie shifted on the stool, inspecting her manicure. "We are taking a pause," Maddie said, correcting our mother gently. "Lakeshore is just toxic right now. The energy is off, and the startup world is brutal. Phoebe, you wouldn't understand because you have a corporate job, but the market is just really volatile. We need to pivot. Pivot, I repeated. We need to stabilize, Trent added, finally looking up from his screen. Rebuild the foundation, launch version 2.0. So, Ellen stepped forward, commanding the space. Madison and Trent are moving back home for a while, just until they get back on their feet. I felt a flicker of annoyance, but I pushed it down. It was typical. Maddie crashed, and she came home to Mommy. It had happened before. Okay, I said, trying to sound supportive. Well, the guest room is full of boxes right now, but I can help you clear it out this weekend. The sofa bed in the den is okay for a few nights. The silence that followed my offer was deafening. Maddie exchanged a look with Ellen. It was a look of conspiratorial patience, like two adults deciding how to explain quantum physics to a toddler. The guest room is too small. Phoebe, Ellen said flatly, and Trent needs a home office space. They can't live out of boxes. They need to project success to attract new investors. They need space. Okay, I said slowly. So what is the plan? The plan, Ellen said, is that they take the master suite. I blinked. The master suite was the largest room in the house. It had the attached bathroom with the soaking tub. It was the room my parents had shared. After Dad died, Mom had moved into the smaller downstairs bedroom because she said the master had too many memories, and I had moved into the master suite. I had painted the walls. I had bought the king-sized bed frame. I had installed the blackout curtains so I could sleep before my early shifts. You want me to switch rooms with you? I asked Mom. You want to move back upstairs? No, Ellen said. She took a breath, smoothing her hands over her apron. I am staying in my room. Maddie and Trent are taking the master suite. Then where am I sleeping? I asked. The silence returned, heavier this time. Maddie picked up a ceramic coaster one I had bought from a local artisan market and turned it over in her hands, avoiding my gaze. There is the basement, Ellen said. I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that escaped before I could catch it. The basement, Mom. The basement is unfinished. It smells like mildew. The floor is concrete. There is no heat down there. It is private, Ellen countered. You could put a space heater down there. It is plenty of room for one person. Or, Maddie chimed in, her voice bright and helpful, you could find your own place. I mean, honestly, Phoebe, you are 29. Most people your age have been gone for years. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at the quartz countertop beneath my hand. I looked at the stainless steel refrigerator that I had bought 3 years ago when the old one died and spoiled a week's worth of groceries. I looked at the expensive espresso machine on the corner shelf, the one Maddie was currently drinking from, which I had purchased as a Christmas gift for the house. I looked at the dining table visible through the archway, the solid oak one I had saved up for 6 months to replace the wobbly card table we had been eating on after the funeral. You want me to move into the damp basement, I said, my voice steady but low. So Maddie and Trent can have my room. It is about family support. Phoebe, Maddie said, leaning forward, her eyes wide and pleading. You are single. You do not need that much space. You are at work all the time anyway. We are trying to build a future here. We just need the master suite for a while. 6 months, maybe a year. You will land on your feet. You always do. You are so sturdy. Sturdy. That was the word. I was the sturdy one, the one who could take the weight, the beam that held up the roof so everyone else could dance on the shingles. I pay the mortgage, I said. It was the first time I had ever thrown that fact in their faces. I pay the electric bill. I pay for the internet you are using right now. Trent, I pay for the food in that fridge. Ellen's face hardened. The mask of neutrality slipped, revealing the irritation beneath. This is my house. Phoebe, your father and I bought this house. You just contribute to the household expenses. That is what children do when they live at home as adults. Contribute. I held up the stack of envelopes in my hand. Mom, I pay everything. You haven't paid a utility bill since Dad died. And you have been living here rent-free long enough, Ellen snapped. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Rent-free. The absurdity of it made my head spin. I looked at the bill in my hand. It was for $340. The mortgage transfer hitting my account on the first of every month was $1,200. The groceries were another $600 a month. I had spent 5 years pouring every cent of my disposable income into this house. I had fixed the roof. I had paid for the new water heater. I had hired the landscapers because Mom said mowing the lawn hurt her back. And to her, I was a squatter. I was a tenant who had overstayed her welcome. I looked at Maddie. She was watching me with a mixture of defiance and boredom. She did not care about the logistics. She did not care about the money. She just wanted the best room in the house because she felt she deserved it. She had failed in the city, so she was coming back to conquer the kingdom I had built, and she expected me to abdicate the throne without a fight. In my head, a voice that sounded suspiciously like a YouTube narrator cleared its throat. Before we dive into how I turned their little plan upside down, do not forget to like this video, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you are watching from, because you are about to see what happens when the boring daughter finally walks away. The panic that should have been there, the fear of being homeless, the hurt of being rejected did not come. Instead, a strange, icy calm settled over me. It started in my chest and spread out to my fingertips. It was the same feeling I got at work when a driver called to say a shipment was lost, and I realized shouting would not fix it. I had to assess the damage, calculate the variables, and execute a new route. They did not see me. They saw a wallet. They saw a maid. They saw a piece of furniture that had started talking back. If I argued, I would look like the villain. If I cried, I would look weak. If I stayed and moved into the basement, I would be accepting my status as a second-class citizen in the home I paid for. So those are my choices, I asked softly. The basement or the street? Don't be dramatic, Ellen said, turning back to the sink to wash a grape. Nobody is putting you on the street. We are just asking you to make a sacrifice for your sister. She is family. Family helps family. Right, I said. Family helps family. I looked at the receipt sitting on the counter next to Maddie's elbow. It was from a luxury boutique in Lakeshore. The date was yesterday. The amount was $450. She had no money for rent, but she had $450 for a scarf. I looked at Trent. He was not even looking at me. He was typing. I looked at my mother. She was not looking at me either. She was looking at Maddie, her eyes soft and full of adoration. I realized then that I had never really been living in this house with them. I had been sustaining a fantasy for them. I was the stagehand keeping the lights on so they could perform their little play of success and comfort. And now, they wanted the stagehand to sleep in the cellar so the stars could have bigger dressing rooms. Okay, I said. Ellen turned around, surprised by my sudden capitulation. Okay. If you want me gone, I will get out of your way, I said. My voice was steady. It did not shake. I understand. You need the space. Maddie needs the room. Maddie clapped her hands together, the sound sharp in the quiet kitchen. Oh, thank God, Phoebe. Thank you. I knew you would get it. Honestly, it is going to be so fun. We can do family dinners, and I can help you decorate the basement so it is not so dungeony. I am not moving to the basement, I said. Ellen frowned. Phoebe, be reasonable. You can't afford an apartment in this market on such short notice. I will figure it out, I said. You gave me a choice. Move to the basement or move out. I am choosing to move out. Well, Ellen sniffed, clearly annoyed that I wasn't taking the basement option, which would have kept me handy for errands and bill paying. If that is what you want to do to your mother, abandon me when I'm trying to help your sister, then fine, be that way. I will, I said. I tightened my grip on the mail. The envelopes crinkled. I will go pack, I said. We need the room by tomorrow night, Trent said, speaking for the second time. The movers are bringing our bed tomorrow afternoon. Sure, I said. Tomorrow. I turned my back on them. I walked out of the kitchen, past the living room with the 70-inch television I had bought for the Super Bowl party Mom wanted to host last year, past the thermostat I had upgraded to a smart system to save money on heating, and toward the stairs. As I climbed the steps to the master suite, the room that was technically mine for only 12 more hours a single, cold thought crystallized in my mind. They thought family support meant I gave, and they took. They thought the lights stayed on by magic. They thought the water ran because the city liked them. They thought the mortgage paid itself. If they thought they could live this life without me, I was going to give them the opportunity to try. I walked into my bedroom and closed the door. I did not throw myself on the bed and weep. I did not call a friend to vent. I walked over to my desk, sat down, and placed the stack of bills in the center of the blotter. Then, I pulled a suitcase out of the closet. Tonight, I was not just packing my clothes. I was not just packing my toiletries. I was packing my role as the dutiful daughter. I was packing the safety net. I was packing the checkbook. I looked at the electric bill one last time. Past due notice included. I picked it up and dropped it into the open suitcase. If I was leaving, I was taking everything that belonged to me. And that included the reality of what it costs to live in this house. Let's see how much they enjoy the master suite when the power goes out. To understand why I stood in that kitchen with a suitcase full of unpaid bills, you have to understand that I did not just live in that house. I built it. Or, at least, I finished building it when the rest of the world walked away. It started 5 years ago. My father, George Brooks, had just retired from 40 years of working mid-level management at a paper supply firm. He was a man who spoke little but dreamed loud, and his dream was always to buy a fixer-upper in Maple Ridge, a quiet town where the trees were old and the pace was slow. He wanted a project. He wanted something he could shape with his own hands because he had spent his entire life pushing papers that other people signed. When he bought the place, my mother, Ellen, refused to step inside for the first 2 weeks. She sat in the car with her arms crossed, staring at the peeling siding and the overgrown lawn that looked more like a jungle than a garden. To be fair, it was a disaster. The roof leaked in 3 different places every time it rained. The hardwood floors were rotted through in the hallway, covered by shag carpet that smelled like wet dog and history. The electrical system was a fire hazard waiting for a spark, and the walls were peeling layers of lead paint that flaked off like snow. But Dad saw something else. I remember standing in the center of the gutted living room with him. The air was thick with dust, and the only light came from a single naked bulb swinging from a fraying wire. He looked at me, his eyes bright blue and crinkling at the corners, and he said, "We will make this ours. Phoebe, brick by brick." I was 24 then, working a temp job and trying to figure out who I was supposed to be. My sister, Madison, was 24 as well, but she had already figured out who she was, or rather, she had figured out who she wanted people to think she was. She had moved to Lakeshore the year before to pursue opportunities. In Madison language, opportunities meant posting photos of avocado toast and rooftop cocktails while trying to convince skincare brands to send her free moisturizer. She was chasing the influencer dream, living in a loft apartment she could not afford, funded by credit cards and the occasional guilt trip wire transfer from Dad. While Maddie was in the city posting about her hustle and her grind, Dad and I were actually grinding for 6 months. My weekends belonged to that house. I would drive over on Saturday mornings, my car trunk rattling with tools. Dad would already be there, a thermos of terrible, bitter coffee waiting on a sawhorse. We developed a rhythm. We stripped wallpaper until our fingers were raw. We learned how to lay tile by watching videos on his cracked tablet, arguing over whether a herringbone pattern was too ambitious for beginners. We spent hours sanding the salvageable parts of the floor, the sawdust coating our eyelashes and filling our lungs until we were coughing up wood. We listened to his playlist, a loop of classic rock that I pretended to hate but secretly loved. We debated backsplash tiles. I wanted subway tile because it was timeless. He wanted mosaic because it hid the spaghetti sauce stains better. We laughed. We ate cold sandwiches on the floor. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was not just George Brooks' daughter, the quiet one, the reliable one. I was his partner. I was his right hand. He looked at me with respect, asking my opinion on grout colors and load-bearing walls, and I felt seen in a way I never had before. Then came that Tuesday in November. It was a Tuesday. That is the detail that always sticks with me. Tragedies should happen on dark, stormy nights, or at least on a somber Sunday. They should not happen on a bright, crisp Tuesday afternoon while you are at work filing spreadsheets. Dad suffered a massive stroke while he was at the hardware store picking up a box of finishing nails. He was gone before the ambulance even reached the hospital. The days that followed were a blur of gray static. I remember the phone call. I remember the sound of my mother screaming, a sound that did not seem human. But mostly, I remember the house. I went there the night he died. I stood in the half-finished kitchen, surrounded by tools that were still exactly where he had left them. The drill was sitting on the counter. The box of nails was open. It was a freeze frame of a life interrupted. A sentence cut off in the middle of a word. The funeral was a circus, and Madison was the ringmaster. She flew in from Lakeshore wearing a black dress that was tailored to perfection, her makeup flawless despite the occasion. She cried loudly, theatrically, clinging to Dad's casket while her friends filmed her for her story. She posted a montage of photos, most of them from when we were children, because she had barely seen him in the last 3 years, with the caption, "R.I.P. Daddy." My heart is shattered. It got 4,000 likes. After the service, we went back to the house for the wake. It was still a construction zone. There was plastic sheeting over the doorways, and the floors were unfinished plywood in some places. I watched Maddie navigate the living room. She was holding a glass of wine, looking around with distaste. At one point, her heel got caught in a gap in the subfloor. She stumbled, spilled a drop of wine, and let out a sharp sigh of annoyance. "This place is a hazard," she said loud enough for half the guests to hear. "I cannot believe he left Mom with this mess. My heels are ruined." She did not see the work. She did not see the weekends we spent sweating and laughing. She just saw a mess that was inconvenient for her footwear. 2 days later, Maddie packed her bags. She told Mom she had to get back to Lakeshore because the energy in Maple Ridge was too depressing and it was blocking her creative flow. She hugged Mom, promised to call, and drove away, leaving a cloud of exhaust and a silence that felt heavy enough to crush bones. That left me, Mom, and the house. Ellen was not coping. She was a woman who had gone from her father's house to her husband's house, never writing a check or paying a bill in her life. George had handled everything. With him gone, she dissolved. She sat in the old armchair in the living room, staring at the wall, surrounded by a mountain of paperwork she did not understand. Insurance claims, funeral costs, the mortgage, the contractors who wanted to get paid for materials. I had a choice. I remember sitting in my car outside the house one evening, the engine running. I had an interview lined up in another city. I could have left. I could have sold the house as is, taken the loss, and moved Mom into a condo. I could have started my own life, but then I went inside and saw her. She was holding a piece of paper, her hands trembling so hard the paper made a rattling sound. She looked at me with eyes that were terrified and vacant all at once. "I cannot do this. Phoebe," she whispered, "I do not know how to do this." So, I stayed. I took the job at Harborline Logistics, not because I was passionate about shipping routes, but because they offered full benefits and a salary that started immediately. It was a 40-minute commute each way, and the work was soul-crushing, but it paid the bills, and there were a lot of bills. For the next 5 years, I became the ghost in the machine of that house. I created a separate bank account that I mentally labeled the house account. Every 2 weeks, my paycheck hit my personal account, and I immediately transferred 70% of it into the house account. I paid the mortgage. It was $1,200 a month. I paid the property taxes. That was another $4,000 a year. I paid for the funeral, because Dad's life insurance policy was a fraction of what Mom thought it was, and she wanted the mahogany casket and the catered reception, but the biggest expense was finishing the house. I could not leave it the way it was, half done and haunting. I hired contractors to finish the electrical work Dad and I had planned. I paid for the insulation. I paid for the drywall. I paid for the roof repairs when we found out the flashing was installed wrong. I finished the kitchen. I bought the quartz countertops because I remembered Dad saying he wanted something that would last forever. I bought the stainless steel appliances. I bought the hardwood for the living room and spent my nights installing it myself because I could not afford the labor costs anymore. I worked 10-hour shifts at Harborline, dealing with angry truckers and incompetent managers, and then I would come home and put on my work clothes. I painted every square inch of that house. I installed the baseboards. I hung the light fixtures. And through it all, Ellen began to recover, but she did not recover by learning how to manage her life. She recovered by deciding that her life was simply being managed, and that was how it should be. She never asked where the money came from. She never asked how the electricity stayed on or how the refrigerator was always full of food. To her, the house was just there. It was a natural resource, like air or sunlight. She started living as if everything was free. She would leave the lights on in every room. She would crank the heat up to 75 degrees in the winter, while I sat in my room wearing 2 sweaters to save money. She hired a lawn service because she did not like the noise of the mower, and she just handed them the invoice, assuming it would be taken care of. I took care of it. I always took care of it. I waited for a thank you. I spent 5 years waiting for her to look at me and say, "Phoebe, I know this is hard. Phoebe, thank you for keeping a roof over my head. Phoebe, thank you for finishing Dad's dream." It never came. Instead, what came was criticism. "Why did you pick this shade of gray?" she would ask, looking at the living room walls I had spent 3 weekends painting. "It feels a little cold, doesn't it? Maddie says warm tones are more inviting." Maddie says. Maddie was still in Lakeshore, struggling to pay her own rent, but she had plenty of opinions on how I should spend my money. She would come home for holidays, walk through the house like a visiting dignitary, and point out flaws. "The Wi-Fi is a little slow in the guest room," she would say. "You should really upgrade to the fiber optic package." And Mom would nod and look at me. "Phoebe, fix the Wi-Fi. Your sister needs to upload her videos." I would look at the house account. I would look at the dwindling number in the balance column. I was driving a 7-year-old car that needed new brakes. I had not bought new clothes in 2 years. I cut my own hair over the bathroom sink, but I upgraded the Wi-Fi because that is what I did. I was the sturdy one. I was the foundation. You do not thank a foundation for holding up the house. You just walk on it. I remember one night specifically. About 3 years in. It was late, maybe 2 in the morning. I was in the kitchen, trying to fix a leak under the sink. I was lying on my back, half inside the cabinet, holding a wrench and a flashlight. I was exhausted. My eyes were burning, and my back was spasming from a double shift at work. Mom came into the kitchen for a glass of water. She stepped over my legs without looking down. She filled her glass, drank it, and set it in the sink right above my head. "You should really call a plumber." "Phoebe," she said, yawning, "that dripping noise is keeping me awake." Then she walked back to her room. I lay there on the cold floor, the smell of old pipes and mildew in my nose, and I felt a crack form in my chest. It was not a loud crack. It was a hairline fracture, the kind that happens right before the dam bursts. She did not see me. She saw a service, and as I lay there, I realized that in their eyes, I had no needs. I had no dreams. I had no limits. I was simply the mechanism by which their comfort was delivered. That was the night I started keeping the receipts. I do not know why I did it at first. Maybe it was just my logistics brain kicking in. Maybe it was a subconscious warning system. But I bought a scanner. Every time I paid a bill, every time I bought a piece of lumber, every time I paid for a gallon of paint, I scanned the receipt and saved it to a folder on my hard drive. I saved the bank transfer confirmations. I saved the property tax records. I told myself it was for taxes. I told myself it was just good record keeping. But looking back, I think deep down, I knew that one day, the narrative of the dutiful daughter would not be enough for them. I knew that eventually, they would push too hard, and I would need to prove that I existed. I built that house on my back. I poured my salary, my youth, and my grief into the mortar of those walls. I made it a home for them while I slowly turned into a stranger in my own life. And now, standing in the bedroom I had painted, looking at the closet I had built, knowing they wanted to kick me into the basement so Maddie could play pretend princess in my sanctuary, the sadness was gone. The fracture that had started that night under the sink had finally split open, but nothing fell apart. Instead, something hard and sharp emerged from the wreckage. I closed the suitcase. I zipped it shut with a sound that was final and satisfying. They wanted the house. They could have the house, but they were about to find out that a house does not run on good vibes and Instagram captions. It runs on money, and the bank was officially closed. 2 years after we buried my father, the escape hatch opened. It did not look like much at first, just a standard notification on my phone screen while I was standing in the break room at Harborline Logistics, stirring powdered creamer into lukewarm coffee. But when I opened the email, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. It was an acceptance letter from Ridgeport University. I had applied to their part-time Master of Business Administration program months ago on a whim. During a particularly dark night when the silence of the house felt like it was crushing my lungs, I had never actually expected to get in. But there it was. And right below it was a second email from my company's corporate headquarters, based on my performance metrics, which were impeccable because I had no life outside of work. They were offering me a promotion to regional manager. I remember reading the offer letter 3 times. The salary was $85,000 a year. That was nearly double what I was making. But the real prize was the location. The position was based in Northgate, a bustling city 3 hours north of Maple Ridge. Northgate. For a few intoxicating minutes, I let myself go there. I imagined a small apartment with big windows that looked out over a skyline instead of my neighbor's overgrown hedges. I imagined walking to coffee shops where nobody knew my name or my tragedy. I imagined dating. I imagined studying late at night in a library, worrying about case studies, instead of worrying about whether the gutters needed cleaning or if Mom had remembered to take her blood pressure medication. I felt light. I felt weightless. It was the first time in 2 years I had felt like Phoebe Brooks, the person, rather than Phoebe Brooks, the support system. I drove home that evening with the windows down, singing along to the radio. I stopped at the grocery store and bought a bottle of sparkling cider and 2 ribeye steaks, an extravagance I never allowed myself because I wanted to celebrate. I was going to tell Mom. I played the scene out in my head. I would tell her, and she would clap her hands. She would say, "You should go. Honey, Dad would be so proud of you." She would say, "I will be fine here. Go live your life." I was so naive. When I walked into the house, the television was blaring a game show. Mom was sitting in her usual spot on the sofa, surrounded by a fortress of tissues and unopened mail. The house smelled like stale air and lavender air freshener, a scent that I now associate entirely with stagnation. "Mom," I said, setting the grocery bags down on the coffee table. "I have news. Big news." She looked up, her eyes glassy. "They raised the rates on the cable bill again." "Phoebe?" I saw the envelope. "Forget the cable bill," I said, unable to keep the smile off my face. "Look." I handed her the printed emails. She took them, adjusting her reading glasses. I watched her face, waiting for the spark. I waited for the smile. I waited for the hug. She read the university acceptance. Then she read the job offer. Then she dropped the papers onto her lap and pressed her hand to her chest. "Northgate," she whispered. The word came out like a diagnosis. "You want to move to Northgate. It is a huge opportunity." "Mom," I said, sitting on the edge of the cushion. "The salary is amazing, and the degree, it would change my entire career trajectory. I could come back on weekends. It is only 3 hours away." Ellen closed her eyes. Her breathing hitched. It was a performance I had seen before. But in that moment, high on my own hope, I forgot to be skeptical. 3 hours, she said, her voice trembling. "If I fell down the stairs, I would be dead for 3 hours before you even got to the car." "Mom, you are 54, I said gently. "You are not invalid. You are healthy. My heart, she gasped, rubbing her sternum. It is fluttering. I can feel it. Ever since your father died. The stress. Phoebe, I cannot stay in this house alone. It is too big. The shadows are too long. I hear noises at night. We could sell it, I suggested, though the thought made my stomach turn after all the work I had put in. You could get a condo. Sell it. She looked at me with genuine horror. Sell your father's dream. How could you even say that he worked himself to death for this house? She reached out and grabbed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Her palms were clammy. Do you remember what he said to you? She asked. Her voice dropped to a whisper, heavy with holy significance. At the hospital. Do you remember the last thing George said to you? I froze. Of course I remembered. I remembered every second of that day. He said, Take care of your mom, Ellen recited, staring deep into my eyes. He didn't say, Go run off to the big city and leave her to rot. He trusted you. Phoebe, he trusted you to be the rock. The air left the room. The vision of the apartment in Northgate, the library, the skyline, it all began to dissolve, replaced by the crushing weight of the living room walls. I am not leaving you to rot, I tried to argue, but my voice was weak. I would still help. I would send money. Money. Ellen spat the word out. I do not need money. Phoebe, I need my family. I need to know that I am not going to die alone in this house like he did. I promised him I would keep this family together. And now you want to tear it apart for what a job title is, a title worth more than your mother's life. She started to cry then, not the loud, theatrical sobbing Maddie did, but a quiet, shaking weep that terrified me. She curled in on herself, looking so small, so fragile. I looked at her hair, which was unwashed and messy. I looked at the pile of mail she was too overwhelmed to open. I realized that if I left, she would not just be lonely. She would cease to function. She would stop paying bills. She would let the house rot. She would starve in the dark. And it would be my fault. The guilt was not a wave. It was a vice. It clamped around my throat and squeezed until I could not breathe. Okay, I said softly. What? She sniffed, looking up. Okay, I repeated. I won't go. I will stay. She sat up instantly. The tears stopped as if someone had turned off a faucet. You promise? I promise, I said. I will decline the offer tomorrow. The relief on her face was immediate. She leaned back, wiped her eyes, and picked up the remote control. Good. I knew you were a good girl. I knew you wouldn't abandon me. Oh, by the way, since you are going to the store later, can you pick up that ice cream I like? The stress has given me a craving for sugar. The next day, I sat in my boss's office. When I told him I was declining the promotion and the transfer, he looked at me like I had grown a second head. Phoebe, he said, leaning over his desk, this is a career maker. You are the best coordinator we have. Why on earth would you turn this down? My family needs me, I said. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. My mother, she is having a hard time. She cannot be alone right now, he sighed, shaking his head. You are setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Brooks, I hope you know that. I walked out of his office and went back to my cubicle. I deleted the email from the university. I deleted the draft of my acceptance letter. I went back to work. If I thought my sacrifice would earn me some capital in the house, I was wrong. It earned me nothing but more chains. 2 days later, Ellen came to me in the kitchen. She looked brighter, healthier than she had in months. Honey, she said, sliding a piece of paper across the counter, I was thinking, since you are staying, and you are managing everything so well, we should streamline things. The bank said we could open a joint credit card. It would be easier for buying household things, groceries, cleaning supplies. That way I don't have to ask you for cash every time I need milk. It sounded reasonable. I was tired. I was defeated. I just wanted things to be easy. Sure, Mom, I said. I did not read the fine print. I did not ask about the credit limit. I just signed my name on the line she pointed to. I trusted her. She was my mother. She had just told me she needed me. I assumed we were on the same team. That signature would come back to haunt me. But in that moment, it just felt like another chore completed. Then there were the visits. If I was the sturdy foundation, Madison was the parade that marched over me. Maddie would come home from Lakeshore every few months. Her visits were treated like state events. A week before she arrived, Ellen would go into a frenzy. "Phoebe, the baseboards in the hallway look dusty," she would say. "You need to scrub them. Maddie has allergies." "Phoebe, go to the wine shop, not the grocery store, the actual wine shop. Maddie likes that Pinot Noir from Oregon, the one that costs $30 a bottle." "Phoebe, move your things out of the bathroom cabinet so Maddie has room for her skincare products." I did it all. I scrubbed. I shopped. I made myself small. When Maddie arrived, she would sweep in wearing oversized sunglasses and a coat that cost more than my monthly car payment. She would hug Mom, squeal, and then dump her bags in the hallway for me to carry up. Dinner those nights was always a production. I would cook roast chicken, risotto, things that took hours because Mom wanted to impress her. We would sit at the dining table I had refinished, and I would watch them. Maddie would push the food around her plate and sigh deeply. "I am just so burned out," she would say, taking a massive sip of the expensive wine I had paid for. "You guys don't understand the pressure. I have to post 3 times a day. The algorithm is changing again. And this brand, this yoga wear company, they still haven't paid me for the collaboration I did last month. It is literally stealing." She would say this while wearing a new Apple Watch. She would say this while her designer handbag sat on the chair next to her. "Oh, you poor thing," Ellen would coo, reaching out to stroke Maddie's hand. "That sounds exhausted. You are working so hard. You are so brave to be out there chasing your dreams." Then, Mom would look at me. "See? Phoebe Maddie is taking risks. You should be more adventurous. You are so safe here." Safe. I looked down at my hands. They were dry and cracked from handling cardboard boxes at the warehouse. I had spent the morning arguing with a union rep about overtime pay. I had skipped lunch to call the plumber about the upstairs toilet. I had transferred the last of my savings to cover the property tax bill that morning. "Work is hard for me too." "Mom," I said quietly, "we are short-staffed, and the budget is tight this month. The heating bill was $300. Ellen waved her hand dismissively, as if I had just commented on the weather. "Oh, Phoebe, stop worrying about numbers. Money is just money. It comes and goes. Look at your sister. She is building a brand. She gained 2,000 followers last week. Isn't that amazing?" "Amazing," I said. "Show her the picture, Maddie," Ellen urged. Maddie pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of herself holding a latte in front of a brick wall. She looked beautiful, carefree, rich. "It got 10,000 likes," Maddie said proudly. "That is great," I said. "Does the landlord accept likes as rent?" The table went silent. Maddie glared at me. Ellen looked disappointed. "There is no need to be jealous. Phoebe," Ellen said coldly, "just because your life is practical doesn't mean you have to be bitter about Madison's success." I was not jealous of the likes. I was not jealous of the fake influence. I was jealous of the fact that Maddie could be a disaster, financial wreck, and a flake, and she was still the golden child. I was the one keeping the roof over their heads, the one sacrificing my career, the one signing away my future, and I was treated like a utility bill necessary, but annoying when I got too high. Each visit added another layer to the sediment of resentment hardening in my chest. It was a slow process. It was not an explosion. It was a calcification. I would wash the dishes while they sat in the living room laughing at some show. I would hear the clinking of wine glasses. I would hear Mom say, "You are so funny. Maddie, you are just like your father." I would grip the edge of the sink until my knuckles turned white. I told myself I was doing the right thing. I told myself that being the good daughter meant enduring the unfairness. I told myself that one day, They would wake up and see it. They would see the sacrifices. They would see the canceled MBA. They would see the bank transfers. But as I stood there, scrubbing a pot that Maddie had burned and left for me to clean, a terrifying thought began to take root in the back of my mind. I was not staying because I loved them. Not anymore. I was staying because I was afraid. I was afraid that if I left, the narrative would be written without me. I would be the villain. I would be the selfish daughter who abandoned her grieving mother. I would be the heartless sister who didn't support the creative genius. Ellen knew that. She knew my fear of being bad was stronger than my desire to be free. She had weaponized my own morality against me. I dried my hands on a towel. I walked into the living room to collect their empty glasses. "Phoebe, could you bring us some more wine?" Maddie asked, without looking away from the TV. "Sure," I said. I went to the kitchen, I opened the bottle, I poured the wine, and I realized that I was not a partner in this family. I was a hostage, and the ransom was my entire life. It was a Monday afternoon when the guillotine finally dropped. I had come home early from the warehouse because a shipment of steel beams had been delayed, and for the first time in months, I thought I might actually have time to cook a real dinner before the sun went down. The house was quiet when I walked in, the kind of quiet that usually meant Ellen was napping or watching her soaps. But as I set my keys on the counter, I heard voices drifting from the living room. It was my mother, and she was using her soothing voice, the one she used when she was talking a neighbor down from a crisis, or more accurately, when she was talking herself into a new drama. I walked to the doorway. Ellen was sitting on the sofa, holding her iPad up in front of her face. On the screen, displayed in high definition, was Madison. Even in a crisis, my sister looked like she was filming a commercial. The lighting was perfect, casting a soft halo around her tear-streaked face. There was definitely a filter on, smoothing out her skin and making her eyes look wider, more tragic. They kicked us out. "Mom!" Maddie wailed, her voice cracking perfectly on the last word. It was a total ambush. The landlord is a monster. He said we missed 3 months, but Trent told him the wire transfer was pending. He did not even listen. He just locked us out. I stood frozen in the hallway. 3 months of rent. That was not a banking error. That was a lifestyle choice. And Trent, Ellen asked, clutching her chest, "What about his investors? They pulled the funding." Maddie sobbed. "They said the market is too volatile. We have been betrayed." "Mom, literally everyone has turned their backs on us. We have nowhere to go. We are sleeping in the car tonight." This was a lie. Maddie would never sleep in a car. She would sleep in a 4-star hotel on a maxed-out credit card before she reclined a passenger seat. Ellen gasped. "The car? Oh, my poor baby. No, absolutely not. You come home. You come home right now." I stepped into the room then, unable to stay silent. "Mom," I said. Ellen ignored me. She stood up, panning the iPad camera around the living room, showing off the freshly painted walls, the plush rug, the gleaming hardwood floors that I had spent my weekends refinishing. "Look, Maddie," Ellen said, her voice thick with pride. "We have all this space. It is safe here. It is warm. Your sister is still here keeping everything perfect. It is just waiting for you. Keeping everything perfect." The phrase hit me like a physical slap. I was not a person to her. I was the groundskeeper. I was the maintenance staff ensuring the resort was ready for the guests to arrive. Maddie sniffled on the screen, wiping a single, photogenic tear from her cheek. "Oh, Mom, you are the best. We just need a safe place to land. Just for a few months. Just to rebuild." Ellen turned to me then, the iPad still in her hand. Her eyes were bright, manic with purpose. "Phoebe, isn't it wonderful? We can help them. We can finally have the whole family together again." I looked at the screen. Maddie was watching me, her expression shifting from tragic victim to expectant queen. "What is the plan?" "Mom," I asked, keeping my voice level. "It is a family support plan," Ellen said, coining the term that would haunt me for the next 24 hours. "We need to circle the wagons. Maddie and Trent need stability. They need to focus on their business without the pressure of bills." "Okay," I said slowly. So they stay in the guest room. Ellen hesitated. She lowered the iPad slightly. Well, I was thinking about that. The guest room is so small. Phoebe. And Trent has all that equipment. He needs a workspace. And Maddie. She is fragile right now. She needs comfort. I felt the cold creeping in. I knew what was coming before she said it. We need to reorganize, Ellen said, waving her hand vaguely as if moving walls was as easy as moving throw pillows. The master suite would be perfect for them. It has the space. It has the light. It would give them the dignity they need to get back on their feet. I stared at her. The master suite. My room. The room I had moved into after Dad died because Mom could not bear to sleep in it. The room I had repainted. The room where I kept my books, my sanity, and the only door in the house that had a lock I actually used. And where do I sleep, I asked. Ellen smiled. A tight, strained smile that did not reach her eyes. Well, there is the basement. The basement. The basement was an unfinished concrete box. It was damp. It smelled of mildew and the old heating oil tank. It was where we stored the Christmas tree and the boxes of Dad's old paperwork. There was one tiny window near the ceiling that let in a sliver of gray light. In the winter, you could see your breath down there. It is not so bad. Ellen continued quickly. Seeing the look on my face, it is private. And really, Phoebe, how much time do you spend in your room anyway? You are at work 10 hours a day. You come home, you eat, you go to sleep. You do not need a view. You just need a bed. Maddie chimed in from the iPad speakers. Yeah, Phoebe, honestly, you are barely home. It is just for a while. You want us to succeed, right? Unless you want me to be homeless. The manipulation was so blatant it was almost impressive. If I said no, I was condemning my sister to homelessness. If I said yes, I was agreeing that I was worth less than the furniture. I did not answer. I just turned and walked into the kitchen. By the time they arrived the next afternoon, the narrative had already solidified. I was the obstructionist. I was the selfish hurdle they had to overcome to achieve their family utopia. I came home from work on Tuesday, the day of the ultimatum, to find them already unpacked. Trent was sitting at the dining table, his laptop open, a half-eaten sandwich on a plate that I would inevitably have to wash. Maddie was on the sofa, directing Mom on where to hang a piece of art she had brought from the city. We had dinner together. It was a surreal experience. We ate a casserole Ellen had made using ingredients I had bought and listened to Trent explain his vision for a new app. I still did not understand what it did. Something about connecting influencers with artisanal water brands. But he spoke about it with the confidence of a man who had never worried about an electric bill in his life. So, the timeline is about 6 months, Trent said, gesturing with his fork. We just need a runway, low overhead, high focus. Exactly, Maddie said, nodding enthusiastically. And while we are scaling, we need to keep expenses zero. So, Phoebe can cover the bills while we reinvest everything back into the company. I stopped chewing. I looked around the table. Excuse me, I said. Maddie looked at me like I was being dense. The bills, Phoebe, the mortgage, the utilities, you are already paying them, right? So nothing changes. We just live here while you keep doing whatever it is you do, and once we make it big, we will totally pay you back, with interest. Ellen beamed. See? It is a perfect plan. Everyone contributes. You contribute the money, and they contribute the potential. The potential. I looked at Trent. He was wearing a watch that cost more than my car. I looked at Maddie. She had a diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist. They were not broke. They were just broke in the way rich people are broke, temporarily illiquid and unwilling to liquidate their toys to pay for their necessities. And I was the liquidity. I stood up. I picked up my plate. I am not doing this, I said. The room went silent. Phoebe, sit down, Ellen said sharply. I am not moving to the basement, I said, my voice shaking slightly. And I am not financing their lifestyle. If they want to live here, they pay rent. They pay a share of the utilities, and they sleep in the guest room. Maddie let out a gasp of outrage. Rent. Phoebe. We are family. You are trying to profit off our misfortune. I am trying to not be exploited, I snapped. That was when Ellen stood up. She walked over to the counter, leaned against it, and delivered the line that would sever the last thread connecting me to this house. It was the scene from the beginning, but now I understood the architecture of it. I understood why she was standing there, flanked by Maddie and Trent. It was a united front. The parasites had attached themselves to the host, and the host was trying to scratch them off. You can move downstairs or move out, Ellen said, her face cold and hard. We need the master for family support. This is what is best for the family. If you cannot be part of the solution, Phoebe, then you are the problem. I looked at her. Really looked at her, for years. I had told myself that Mom was helpless. I told myself she was a victim of grief. A woman who just didn't know how to handle the world without Dad. I had protected her. I had sheltered her. But looking at her now, standing there with her arms crossed, her eyes clear and calculating, I realized I had been wrong. She was not helpless. She was a manager. She was managing me. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew I would never let her starve. She knew I would never let the lights go out. So she had used that. She had used my responsibility as a leash. And now, she had a new, shinier option. Maddie offered her glamour. Maddie offered her drama and excitement, and the vicarious thrill of a city life. I just offered her electricity and groceries. I was boring. I was the utility company. And you do not invite the utility company to dinner, you just expect them to provide the service. She was pitting us against each other. She was giving Maddie my room to buy Maddie's affection, and she was sending me to the basement because she knew or she thought she knew that I would take it. She thought I was desperate for her approval. She thought I would crawl into the dark just to stay in her orbit. A strange sensation washed over me. It was not sadness. It was clarity. It was like someone had turned on a floodlight in a dark room, revealing that the monsters in the corner were just piles of dirty laundry. I did not need to fight for my place here, because this place was not a home. It was a feeding ground. If they thought they could live without me, I was going to let them. I looked at the refrigerator I bought. I looked at the coffee maker Maddie was eyeing. I looked at the walls I painted. If you want me gone, I said quietly, I will get out of your way. I turned around and walked out of the kitchen. I heard Maddie whisper behind me, See? She is just being dramatic. She will be back down in an hour to do the dishes. I walked up the stairs to the master suite. I did not cry. My hands were steady. My heart was beating slow and strong. I walked into the room and pulled out my suitcase. They wanted the master suite. They could have the room, but they were not getting the life that came with it. I was not just going to leave. I was going to evict myself from their lives completely. I was going to take every single thing I had brought into this house, every appliance, every piece of furniture, every light bulb I had paid for. I was going to strip this house down to exactly what they had contributed nothing. Let us see how much potential Trent has when he cannot charge his laptop because the power has been cut. Let us see how perfect the house is when there is no furniture to sit on. I opened the suitcase and started packing. I was not packing for a trip. I was packing for a war. And the first casualty was going to be their comfort. The next day at Harborline Logistics, the break room was buzzing with the usual lunchtime chaos. Drivers were shouting over the microwave hum about traffic on the interstate. And the television in the corner was blaring a local news report. Usually, I would be right there in the middle of it, eating a sad turkey sandwich while simultaneously texting Mom to remind her to take her cholesterol medication and checking the tracking on a delayed shipment. But today, I sat in the quietest corner of the room, my sandwich untouched. My phone was face down on the table. I was not looking at tracking numbers. I was looking at an email I had archived 3 weeks ago without even opening it. The subject line read, Internal Transfer Opportunity. Ridgeview Crossing, Distribution Center. I had ignored it because Ridgeview Crossing was 40 minutes away from Maple Ridge. It was too far to drive back if Mom had a panic attack. It was too far to rush home if a pipe burst. It was too far to be the dutiful daughter, but looking at it now, 40 minutes did not feel like a commute. It felt like a moat. I clicked open the email. The company had just opened a massive new facility there. and they were desperate for experienced coordinators to manage the transition. The package included a salary bump, a signing bonus, and most importantly, corporate housing for key personnel for the first 6 months. I read that line twice. Corporate housing. I did not hesitate. I tapped the screen and dialed the number for Carla in HR. She picked up on the second ring. "Phoebe?" She sounded surprised. "Is everything okay? You usually don't call during lunch." "Hi, Carla?" I said, my voice steady. "I am calling about the Ridgeview Crossing position. The email said you are still looking for a senior coordinator." There was a pause on the line. "Oh, well, yes, the position is technically still open. But Phoebe, we talked about this last month. I thought you said you were tied down with family obligations. You said you couldn't be more than 10 minutes from your mother." "My situation has changed," I said. The words felt strange in my mouth, heavy and light at the same time. I did not offer an explanation. I did not tell her that my family obligations had just evicted me to the basement. I just let the sentence hang there. "Changed how?" Carla asked gently. "I am available," I said. "I can start immediately, and I would need to take advantage of the corporate housing option. Is that unit still available?" "It is," Carla said, her tone shifting to professional enthusiasm. "It is a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex about 5 minutes from the new warehouse. It is fully furnished, but you can bring your own things. Phoebe, are you sure this is a big move?" "I have never been more sure of anything," I said. "Okay," Carla said. "I can fast-track the paperwork. Since it is an internal transfer, we don't need to do the whole interview circus. I can have the contract to you by 5 o'clock today. If you sign it tonight, you can pick up the keys to the apartment on Friday." "Make it Thursday," I said. "I will take a personal day tomorrow to pack." "Done," she said. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment, listening to the warehouse noise. For the first time in 5 years, the noise did not sound like stress. It sounded like background music. I felt a physical sensation in my chest, like a tight band snapping. Someone had opened a window in a room I had not realized was suffocating me. I ate my sandwich. It tasted amazing. That evening, I went home to a house that felt less like a home and more like a hostile territory. Maddie and Trent were in the living room, watching a movie on the 70-inch television I had bought. They did not look up when I walked in. Mom was in the kitchen, making tea. "Oh, Phoebe," she said, not turning around. "Maddie says the Wi-Fi is lagging again. Can you call the provider Trent is trying to upload a pitch deck?" "Sure," I said. I walked past her, up the stairs, and into the master suite. I closed the door and locked it. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I did not call the internet provider. Instead, I logged into the account. Username Phoebe Brooks. Password DadDream123. I went to the profile settings. I downloaded the last 24 months of billing statements. Every single one was paid from a checking account ending in 4092, my account. I created a new folder on my desktop and named it Receipts, Mine. Then I went to the electric company website, downloaded, saved, the water company, downloaded, saved, the gas company, the trash collection service, the landscaping service that cut the grass. Mom claimed she was too frail to mow, the streaming services that Maddie was currently using downstairs. I went through them methodically, like I was auditing a shipping manifest. I had paid for everything, every kilowatt of electricity that kept them warm, every gallon of water they used to shower, every megabyte of data Trent used to play entrepreneur. It was staggering. When I looked at the totals, I felt a wave of nausea. I had spent nearly $60,000 in the last 5 years just on keeping this house functional. That was a down payment on a house of my own. That was a retirement fund. That was a life. And they wanted me in the basement. As I was scrolling through the online banking portal, checking for any recurring payments I might have missed, I saw something that made me freeze. It was a credit card account listed under Joint Lines of Credit. I frowned. I clicked on it. It was a card with a limit of $5,000. The current balance was $2,400. I clicked on the transaction history. Lakeshore Spa and Wellness, $300. Willow Valley Vineyards, $200. TechZone Electronics, $800. I stared at the screen. My breath caught in my throat. This was the card Mom had asked me to sign for 2 years ago. The one she said was for household essentials, so she didn't have to ask me for cash for milk and bread. She had given it to Maddie, or she was using it to buy things for Maddie. I looked at the date of the TechZone purchase. It was 3 days ago. Trent had a new tablet. I had seen it on the table. They were buying toys with credit that was linked to my social security number. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the back of the digital card image. It was 8 o'clock at night, but the automated system eventually connected me to a fraud specialist. I need to close a joint account, I told the representative. I see there is a balance of $2,400. The woman on the line said, We can close the account to new charges, but the balance is still the responsibility of both account holders. Fine, I said. Freeze it. No new charges. Cut off authorization for any authorized users, and remove my name from the account effective immediately after I pay off the current balance. You want to pay it off now? She asked, surprised. No, I said. I will pay it off when the statement closes, but I want the card deactivated tonight, right now. If someone tries to swipe it in 5 minutes, I want it to decline. Okay, ma'am, it is done. I hung up. I felt a grim satisfaction. The next time Trent tried to buy a gadget, or Maddie tried to book a facial, they were going to have an embarrassing conversation with a card reader. I was not done. I opened a new tab and navigated to a different bank, one that had no branches in Maple Ridge. I opened a new checking account in my name only. I set up a transfer for every cent in my current savings account and redirected my direct deposit from Harborline to the new bank, the house account. The one Ellen thought was a magic well that refilled itself was about to run dry. I left exactly $0 in it. Then, I searched for moving companies. I did not look for the budget options. I did not look for the ones where you rent a truck and do it yourself. I needed speed. I needed precision. I needed a crew that could strip a house in 4 hours without asking questions. I found a company called Blue Ridge Movers. Their website promised white glove service and same-day availability. I called the 24-hour line. I need a full pack and move for this Saturday, I told the dispatcher. Saturday is our busiest day, the man said. It will be a premium rate, double time. I don't care, I said. I need a truck large enough for a 3-bedroom household of furniture. And I need it to happen between 10 in the morning and 6 in the evening. That is a tight window for a full house, he warned. I will have everything tagged, I said. You just need to lift and load. How much? He gave me a number that made me wince. It was expensive. It was almost all of the signing bonus I was going to get from the transfer. Book it, I said. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. My heart was pounding. But it was a good rhythm. It was the rhythm of action. I looked at the calendar on my wall. Saturday. I knew their schedule. Maddie had been bragging about it all week. Saturday was the autumn wine tour at Willow Valley Vineyards. It was a big social event for the Lakeshore crowd, and Maddie was determined to go to prove she was still part of the elite scene. She had convinced Ellen to go, probably to pay for the tickets, and Trent was driving them because he wanted to network with the vineyard owners. They would leave at 9 in the morning. They would not be back until at least 6, 8 hours. I had 8 hours to erase 5 years of existence. I stood up and walked around the room. I looked at the bed I slept in. I looked at the dresser. I looked at the curtains. For years, I had looked at these things and seen Dad. I saw the house he wanted. I saw the sanctuary I was trying to preserve for his ghost. But tonight, looking at the sleek modern lamp I had bought with my Christmas bonus, I didn't see Dad. I saw an asset. I walked into the hallway, quiet as a shadow. I looked at the living room below, the sofa, the coffee table, the rug, the dining set, the expensive mixer in the kitchen. They were just things. They were wood and fabric and metal and glass. They were not memories. They were receipts. And I had the receipts. I went back into my room and pulled a roll of blue painter's tape out of my desk drawer. I held it in my hand, feeling its weight. Tomorrow, I would start tagging. If they wanted a house, they could have the house, but they were going to learn the difference between a home and a building. A home is made of the people who care for it. A building is just a box. And on Saturday, I was going to leave them with a very empty box. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp, golden sunshine that Instagram influencers pray for. It was perfect winery weather, downstairs. The house was buzzing with a frantic, perfumed energy. I could hear Maddie debating with Trent about whether her beige fedora was too much or just enough chic. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, fully dressed and wearing my running shoes. I had been awake since 5 o'clock. From the hallway, I heard Ellen's voice, loud and boastful. She was on the phone, likely talking to Mrs. Gable next door. "Oh yes, the whole family is going to Willow Valley. It is a little celebration. Maddie and Trent are just settling in so well. We are doing a private tasting." I rolled my eyes. Private tasting meant they bought the $40 ticket instead of the $20 one. A moment later, there was a sharp knock on my door. It opened before I could answer. Ellen stood there, dressed in a floral wrap dress that I had bought her for Mother's Day 2 years ago. "We are leaving," she announced, checking her reflection in my full-length mirror which, incidentally, I had paid for. "Now, Phoebe, while we are gone, I need you to be productive. Since you're refusing to help with the move properly, the least you can do is prepare the room." She turned to me, her face stern. "Strip the bed, wash the sheets, use the good fabric softener, the lavender one. Maddie and Trent need to sleep comfortably tonight if they are going to take over the master suite. And don't forget to water the ferns on the porch. They looked dry yesterday." I looked at her. She really believed it. She believed I was just going to stay here, wash their sheets, water their plants, and fade into the background like a well-trained servant. "Okay, Mom," I said. "I will take care of everything." "Good," she said, smoothing her dress. "Don't wait up. We might go to dinner after." She closed the door. I listened. I heard the front door open. I heard Maddie's heels clicking on the walkway. I heard the car doors slam. I heard the engine start. And then, finally, I heard the sound of the tires fading down the street. Silence. I waited 2 full minutes, just to be sure they weren't coming back for a forgotten phone charger. Then, I pulled my phone out of my pocket and dialed. "Blue Ridge Movers," a voice answered. "This is dispatch." "This is Phoebe Brooks," I said. "I am the 10 o'clock appointment on Maple Ridge Drive. The driveway is clear." "Copy that, Ms. Brooks. Crew is 5 minutes out." I hung up. I walked over to my desk, opened the drawer, and took out the roll of blue painter's tape. It was time. I started in the living room. I walked to the Italian leather sofa, the one Maddie loved to lounge on. Rip, stick, a bright blue strip of tape across the back. I moved to the coffee table. Solid oak, reclaimed wood, rip, stick, the 70-inch television mounted on the wall, rip, stick, the rug under my feet, the curtains on the windows, the floor lamps, the bookshelf in the corner. I moved to the kitchen, the dining table and 6 chairs, the bar stools Maddie had been sitting on yesterday, rip, stick. I opened the cabinets, the blender, the stand mixer, the expensive knife set, the set of copper pots and pans hanging from the rack. I moved with a cold, efficient speed. I was not angry. I was auditing. Every item I taped was a transaction I had verified the night before. If I paid for it, it was leaving. I went into the guest room, Maddie's old room. Last year, Ellen had guilted me into redecorating it because Maddie needs a nice place to come home to. I had bought a queen-sized platform bed, a memory foam mattress, and high thread count linens. I slapped blue tape on the headboard. I taped the mattress. I taped the nightstands. Then I went to the garage. This was the hardest part. I stood in front of the workbench. My father's tools were there, his red metal tool chest, scratched and dented from years of use, his drill press, his circular saw. Ellen never touched these things. She called them junk and complained they took up space where she wanted to put storage bins. If I left them, they would be sold at a yard sale for pennies on the dollar. Or worse, Trent would try to use them for some ill-fated DIY project and break them. I put a piece of blue tape on the tool chest. "You are coming with me, Dad," I whispered. A rumble outside signaled the arrival of the truck. I walked out to meet them. It was a massive 26-foot box truck. 3 men in blue uniforms jumped out. The leader, a burly guy named Marcus, walked up to me with a clipboard. "Ms. Brooks?" he asked. "That is me," I said. "We have a full pack and load order," he said, looking at the house. "What is going? Anything with blue tape is coming with me," I said. Marcus looked past me into the living room. He saw the sea of blue strips. He raised an eyebrow. "So, pretty much everything." "Everything that makes this place look like a home," I said. "Yes," Marcus grinned. "All right then, boys, let's get to work. Pads and wrap on everything. Let's move." They were efficient. They were like a swarm of locusts. But in reverse, they wrapped the sofa in thick blankets and shrink wrap. They dismantled the dining table in 3 minutes flat. They took the TV off the wall with surgical precision. I stood in the hallway and watched my life being disassembled. The sound of tape ripping, of plastic wrap stretching, of heavy boots on the floor, it was the soundtrack of my liberation. As the living room emptied, the house began to change. Without the rug, the room echoed. Without the curtains, the light was harsh and unforgiving. Without the furniture, the scuffs on the baseboard, scuffs I had made while installing the floor, were visible. It stopped looking like a cozy family home. It started looking like exactly what it was, a shell. While they worked, I went into the small den I used as a home office. I printed out a single sheet of paper. On it, I had listed the termination dates for every utility: electricity disconnect scheduled for Monday, water disconnect scheduled for Monday, gas disconnect scheduled for Monday, internet disconnect scheduled for Monday. I stapled copies of the most recent paid receipts to the back of it, proof that the accounts were current up to the minute I walked out the door. I walked through the house one last time to make sure I had not missed anything. In the living room, only a few things remained. Ellen's old armchair, the one she had brought from her parents' house 30 years ago, sat forlornly in the corner. The antique china cabinet she had inherited, which I had never liked, stayed against the wall. A few crooked picture frames. In the kitchen, the counters were bare. No coffee maker, no toaster, no microwave. I had even packed the spice rack. It was brutal. It was thorough. It was fair. "That is the last of it, ma'am," Marcus said, walking in from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. "Truck is packed tight. Where are we headed?" "Ridgeview Crossing," I said. "The address is on the paperwork. It is the new corporate housing complex." "Got it," he said. 40 minutes. We will meet you there." I signed the clipboard. The total was high, but as I handed him my credit card, my new card, from my new bank, I felt lighter than I had in years. The truck rumbled to life and pulled away. The street was quiet again. I stood in the empty kitchen. The silence was different now. It was not the heavy, suffocating silence of a house holding its breath. It was the hollow, echoing silence of a vacuum. I took the spare key off my ring. I placed it in the center of the empty quartz island. I took the envelope I had prepared. Inside was the utility disconnect notice and a short note. I placed it next to the key. The note read, "Mom, you said I should move out so Maddie could have space. I listened. I am giving you all the space you wanted, everything I took with me. I have a receipt for, the house is yours, the bills are yours. From now on, the family support is yours too. Phoebe." I looked around one last time. I saw the ghost of myself painting the trim. I saw the ghost of myself installing the backsplash. I saw the ghost of the girl who had tried so hard to be enough. I left her there. She belonged to this house. I did not. I walked out the front door. I locked it behind me. I walked down the steps, got into my car, and started the engine. I did not look back at the house as I drove away. I looked forward, toward the highway, toward Ridgeview Crossing, toward a bedroom that was mine, and a bank account that only I could touch. I had stripped the house down to the truth. Now, they would have to live in it. The corporate apartment in Ridgeview Crossing was nothing like the house I had left behind. It was a compact, efficient two-bedroom unit on the second floor of a beige complex that looked exactly like every other beige complex in America. The walls were painted a sterile, clinical white. The floors were a pale laminate that clicked sharply under my heels. The kitchen was a galley style, so narrow that if I opened the dishwasher, I could not open the refrigerator. It was perfect. My furniture, which had filled the sprawling rooms of the Maple Ridge house, felt crowded here. The Italian leather sofa dominated the small living area, and the 70-inch television looked comically large mounted on the modest wall. I had to stack boxes of books in the corner because there were not enough shelves. But as I navigated around the obstacle course of my own belongings, I felt a strange, swelling sensation in my chest. These things were here. They were mine. They were not being used as props for Maddie's lifestyle. They were not being worn down by people who did not respect how much they cost. For the first time in 5 years, my possessions felt like they actually belonged to me. That first night, the silence was the loudest thing in the room. I stood in the kitchen and unpacked the espresso machine. I filled the reservoir with water. I measured the beans. It was the same machine I had used every single morning to make Ellen her cappuccino. Extra foam. Exactly the way she liked it. She never made her own coffee. She said the buttons were too complicated, which was code for, "I prefer to be served." I pressed the button. The machine hissed and gurgled. A familiar sound that usually triggered a Pavlovian response of stress, the hurry to get the cup to her before the foam settled. The brace for her criticism that it was too cold or too strong, but tonight, the cup was for me. I took a sip. It was hot, bitter, and wonderful. I walked out onto the small balcony. It overlooked a parking lot and a dumpster, a far cry from the manicured lawn I had paid a landscaping crew to maintain in Maple Ridge. But nobody was asking me to mow this parking lot. Nobody was complaining that the dumpster was unsightly. I sat down on one of the dining chairs I had dragged outside. I listened. There was no television blaring a reality show from the living room. There was no Maddie shouting into her phone about engagement metrics. There was no Ellen sighing loudly, waiting for someone to ask her what was wrong. There was just the hum of the highway in the distance and the sound of my own breathing. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. It was 8 o'clock in the evening. I knew exactly what was happening in Maple Ridge right now. They would be home from the wine tour. They would be walking through the front door, tipsy and tired, expecting soft beds and a clean house. I looked at the power button. The old Phoebe would have kept the phone on. She would have waited for the call, braced for the screaming, and tried to explain herself. She would have apologized. She would have tried to fix it. The new Phoebe pressed the button and held it down until the screen went black. I decided then that the cruelest thing I could do to them was not to scream back. It was to deny them an audience. They fed on reaction. They fed on drama. Without me there to absorb the shock, the energy would have nowhere to go but back onto them. I went to sleep in my own bed, on my own sheets, in a room that had a lock on the door. I slept for 9 hours straight. When I woke up on Sunday morning, the sun was streaming through the cheap blinds. I felt disoriented for a moment, reaching for a mental list of chores that did not exist. I did not have to water the ferns. I did not have to start a load of laundry for Maddie. I sat up and looked at my phone sitting on the nightstand. It looked like an unexploded bomb. I took a deep breath and turned it on. The device vibrated violently in my hand, a continuous, angry buzz that lasted for nearly a full minute as the notifications flooded in. 47 missed calls, 82 text messages, 12 voicemails. I made myself coffee before I looked at them. I needed the caffeine to process the vitriol. I sat at the small kitchen table and started scrolling. The first few texts from Ellen, sent around 6:30 the previous evening, were confusion. Phoebe, where is the sofa? Is this a joke? Did you take the rugs? Call me right now. Then, the panic set in. Phoebe, where is the bed? Maddie is crying. Why is the house empty? Did you get robbed? I'm calling the police. Then, the realization. I saw the note. How dare you? How dare you do this to your family? You ungrateful child. After everything we did for you, bring it back. Bring it back right now, or I swear I will never speak to you again. You are destroying this family." I scrolled down to Maddie's messages. They were less about family and more about her personal inconvenience. "You took the mattress. Are you psycho? I have back problems. Phoebe, I cannot sleep on the floor. You are a thief. Mom says she's going to sue you. I hope you go to jail. This is not what family does. You are jealous and sick. Trent needs the Wi-Fi password. Why is the router gone? You are messing with his business. There were voicemails too. I played one from Ellen. Her voice was high and shrill, the tone of a woman who had lost control of her environment and was terrified. Phoebe Brooks, you pick up this phone. We are sitting on the floor. Do you hear me? There is no food. There is no coffee maker. You took the toaster. Who takes a toaster? You are being cruel. You are being malicious. If you do not have a truck here by noon, I am disowning you. I mean it. Don't bother coming back. I deleted the voicemail. Don't bother coming back. She did not realize that was not a threat. It was a permission slip. I walked out onto the balcony again. I looked down at the parking lot. A neighbor was walking a golden retriever. The dog wagged its tail. The sky was blue. I waited for the guilt to hit me. I waited for that crushing sense of obligation that had ruled my life for 5 years. I waited to feel like the bad daughter, but it did not come. Instead, I realized something profound. For 5 years, their panic had been my emergency. If Ellen had a headache, I dropped everything. If Maddie broke a nail, I listened to a 20-minute rant. Their emotions were the weather, and I was the one without an umbrella. But now, their panic was just noise. It was happening 40 minutes away, in a house I no longer lived in, over problems I had already solved for myself. I sipped my coffee. The coffee tasted better than guilt. Around noon. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Sarah, a receptionist at Harborline Logistics, who I was friendly with. "Hey Phoebe, I know you left the company, but I thought you should see this." Yikes. Attached was a link to an Instagram story. I clicked it. It opened Maddie's profile. The video started with a close-up of Maddie's face. She was not wearing makeup, which was a strategic choice to look vulnerable. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She was wrapping a thin blanket, one of the few I had left because it was moth-eaten, around her shoulders. "Guys," she whispered, looking into the camera lens, "I don't even know what to say. We came home yesterday to this." She flipped the camera. She walked through the empty living room. The sound of her footsteps echoed dramatically on the hardwood. She panned over the empty spot where the TV used to be. She showed the kitchen counters. "Stripped bare, my sister." Maddie's voiceover continued, shaking with emotion. "My own sister. She waited until we were gone, and she robbed us. She took everything. The beds, the food. She even took our mom's coffee maker. We slept on the floor last night. Mom is devastated. I don't know how someone could be so heartless to their own flesh and blood. We are trying to rebuild, and she just kicked the legs out from under us." She flipped the camera back to her face. A single tear tracked down her cheek. "Please pray for my mom. She doesn't deserve this. If anyone knows a good lawyer, DM me. We are going to get through this." But wow. Just wow. The caption read, "My sister robbed us and ran. The betrayal is real. Family drama victim starting over." I watched it twice. The first time, I felt a flash of anger. The lies were breathtaking. She made it sound like I had backed a truck up and stolen their property, conveniently leaving out the part where I had paid for every single item she was filming. But the second time I watched it, I laughed. It was a dry, humorless laugh. They were so predictable. They always controlled the narrative. They were the victims, and the world was always doing something to them. They could not admit that the house was empty because they had never filled it with anything of their own. I closed the app. I did not comment. I did not report it. I had a folder on my laptop called Receipts, mine. Inside were PDF files of every purchase, every bank transfer, every utility payment. I had the deed to the car. I had the credit card statements showing Maddie's unauthorized spending. Let them tell stories. I had the truth, and in a court of law, or even the court of public opinion if it came to that. Receipts beat tears every time. Monday morning arrived. I put on my best blazer, picked up my briefcase, and drove 5 minutes to the new distribution center at Ridgeview Crossing. Walking into the new office felt like stepping onto a different planet. The facility was massive, gleaming with chrome and glass. The air hummed with the sound of conveyor belts and forklifts, the music of logistics. My new manager, Darren, met me at the reception. He was a tall, no-nonsense man with a firm handshake and a clipboard. "Phoebe," he said, smiling. "Welcome aboard. Carla told me you transferred from the Maple Ridge branch. We are lucky to have you. I heard you run a tight ship." "I try," I said. "We are drowning in scheduling conflicts on the loading dock," Darren said, leading me toward a glass-walled office. "I need someone who can look at a mess and see the pattern." "Think you can handle it?" "Looking at a mess and seeing the pattern is my specialty," I said. For the next 4 hours, I was in my element. I organized spreadsheets. I rerouted 3 delayed trucks. I set up a new filing system for the drivers. I worked with a focus I had not felt in years, because for the first time, my brain was not running a background program of worrying about Ellen's dinner or Maddie's mood. I was good at this. I was respected here. I was a professional, not a doormat. Then, at 11 o'clock, my personal cell phone buzzed. I glanced at it. It was Luis, the head of security at the Harborline branch in Maple Ridge. Luis and I had worked together for 4 years. He was a good man who had once helped me change a flat tire in the rain when I was rushing home to check on Mom. I picked up. "Hey, Luis, everything okay?" "Phoebe," Luis's voice was a harsh whisper. "You need to know what is happening here. It is a scene." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "Your mother and your sister," Luis said. "They are in the lobby. They are screaming. Phoebe, really screaming." I closed my eyes. "Oh, God. What are they saying?" "Your mother is yelling that the company has kidnapped you," Luis said, sounding embarrassed on my behalf. "She is telling the receptionist that we are hiding you. She is demanding to see the manager. She says you disappeared, and she knows you are here because your car isn't in your driveway." "And Maddie?" I asked, dread pooling in my gut. "The sister is filming it," Luis said. "She has her phone out. She is streaming live or something. She is telling people that Harborline is holding you against your will." I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. Shame. Hot, prickly shame. I had moved 40 minutes away. I had changed jobs. I had blocked their numbers. And yet, here they were, dragging their circus into my professional sanctuary. They were not worried about me. They were worried about their resources. They were trying to shame me into coming back to the cage. If I let this go, they would find me here. They would show up at Ridgeview Crossing. They would scream in Darren's lobby. They would infect this new life before it had even started. I could not hide. I had to end this. "Luis," I said, my voice hard. "Listen to me carefully." "I am listening," he said. "Do not let them pass the turnstile. Do not call the manager. Tell them you spoke to me." "Okay," Luis said. "What do I tell them?" I looked through the glass wall of my office. I saw the clean, organized warehouse floor. I saw my future, and I knew I had to go back to the past one last time to burn the bridge properly. "Tell them to go home," I said. "Tell them I am safe, and tell them if they want to talk to me, I will meet them at the house at 6 o'clock this evening." 6 o'clock at the house," Luis repeated. "Yes," I said. "And Luis, tell them this is the only chance they get. If they cause a scene, I don't show up." "I got you." "Phoebe," Luis said. "Good luck." I hung up the phone. My hand was trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had thought leaving was the end. I was wrong. Leaving was just the opening move. The endgame was making them understand that I was never coming back. I turned back to my computer monitor. I had 5 hours of work to finish before I drove back to Maple Ridge. I was going to finish every single task. I was going to do my job perfectly. And then, I was going to drive back to that empty house and look them in the eye. I was going to call it home one last time, just long enough to tell them it was not mine anymore. The drive back to Maple Ridge at 6 o'clock that evening felt like driving backward in time. As I exited the highway and turned onto the familiar two-lane road that led into town, the physical sensation of the place pressed in on me. I passed the gas station where I had stood in the freezing rain countless times, pumping gas into Ellen's car because she claimed the smell of petrol gave her a migraine. I passed the grocery store where I had spent 5 years calculating the price per ounce of laundry detergent, clipping coupons to save 40 cents, so I could afford the premium orange juice Maddie liked when she visited. Every corner of this town held a memory of my servitude. It was suffocating. The streets seemed narrower, the air thinner. I gripped the steering wheel of my car, reminding myself that I was a visitor now. I had a key to an apartment in Ridgeview Crossing. I had a badge that opened the doors to a distribution center where people respected me. I was not Phoebe the daughter anymore. I was Phoebe the problem solver. And I was here to close the final ticket. I pulled into the driveway. The house looked different from the outside. Without the warm glow of the lamps I had taken, the windows looked like dark, hollow eyes. It looked abandoned, even though I knew 3 people were inside waiting to ambush me. I walked up the steps and unlocked the door. The sound of the latch clicking open echoed louder than I remembered. I stepped inside. The hallway, stripped of the runner rug and the console table, was a tunnel of bare wood and drywall. The smell hit me instantly. It was the smell of the house itself, old paint, dust, and the faint, settling dampness of a structure that was no longer being artificially heated to 72 degrees. Without the furniture to absorb the sound, my footsteps rang out like gunshots on the hardwood. I walked into the kitchen. The scene that greeted me was so pathetic it almost looked staged. Ellen was sitting on a rusty metal folding chair that I must have missed when I cleared out the garage. She looked small and shriveled. Her posture collapsed inward. Maddie was sitting on an overturned blue plastic storage crate, her legs crossed, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone screen. Trent was leaning against the quartz island, the only thing of value left in the room, trying to look casual. But his eyes were darting around the empty space like a trapped animal. They looked like squatters. They looked like intruders in a house that had rejected them. As soon as I crossed the threshold, Ellen looked up. The moment she saw me, her pathetic posture vanished, replaced by a sudden, explosive rage. She stood up so fast the metal chair clattered backward onto the floor. "You," she spat. "You ungrateful, heartless girl." She took a step toward me, her finger pointing at my chest. "How could you do this to your own mother? I gave you life. Phoebe, I put a roof over your head. And this is how you repay me, by stripping my home, by leaving me to sleep on the floor like a dog." Her voice cracked, wavering between genuine fury and the performance she put on for leverage. "I have never been so ashamed. Your father is looking down on you right now, and he is weeping." I stood perfectly still, clutching the leather portfolio I had brought with me. I did not flinch. I did not look down. "Hello, Mom," I said, before I could say anything else. Maddie jumped up from her crate. She held her phone up. The camera lens pointed directly at my face. The red recording light was blinking. "Say that to the camera," Maddie shouted, her voice shrill. "Tell everyone why you stole our furniture. Tell them why you are a thief." She shoved the phone closer to me. "You stole our bed. Phoebe, we have back problems. You took the television. You took the food. We could sue you for grand larceny. I looked it up. This is theft." "It is not theft," I said calmly, looking directly into the lens of her phone. "It is relocation of personal property." "It is Mom's house," Maddie screamed. "Everything in it belongs to her." "The structure belongs to her," I corrected. "The deed is in Ellen Brooks's name. That is true. And I left the structure. I did not take the light fixtures. I did not take the cabinets. I did not take the toilet." I unzipped my portfolio. I pulled out a thick stack of stapled papers. "However," I continued, my voice steady and projection room clear, "the sofa you were sleeping on, I bought that at West Elm 3 years ago. Here is the receipt, paid from my personal checking account. The bed you wanted to sleep in, bought last year." Receipt here, the television Best Buy, Super Bowl sale, paid by Phoebe Brooks, even the knife you would use to cut an apple. Maddie, I bought that too. I dropped the stack of papers onto the empty quartz counter. It made a heavy, authoritative thud. If you can find a single receipt for a single item I took that has Ellen Brooks' name on it, or yours, I will drive to Ridgeview Crossing right now, load it onto a truck, and bring it back. I will wait. Silence stretched across the kitchen. Maddie lowered her phone slightly. Ellen stared at the stack of papers as if it were a venomous snake. They knew they hadn't paid for a teaspoon in 5 years. Trent cleared his throat. He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. Okay, look, he said, trying to adopt a mediating tone. The furniture is one thing. We can get beanbags or something for now. But Phoebe, surely you didn't cut the services. The lights are on. The water is running. At least the utilities are still on. Right? I turned to look at him. They are on until tomorrow. Trent blinked. Tomorrow. Tomorrow is Monday, I said. I scheduled the disconnects for the start of the business week. The accounts are in my name. I am closing them. You can't do that, Ellen shrieked. It is illegal to cut off power to a residence. It is illegal for a landlord to cut off power to a tenant, I said. But I am not your landlord. Mom, I am just the person who was paying the bill, and I don't live here anymore. So, I stopped paying. I looked at Trent. You are welcome to open new accounts. I left the account numbers and the customer service lines on the counter when I left on Saturday. You just need to call them. They usually ask for a deposit to start new service, especially if you don't have a prior history at the address. The color drained from Ellen's face. It happened instantly, like someone had pulled a plug. She slumped back against the counter, her hand going to her mouth. A deposit, she whispered. Yes, I said. Usually around $200 per utility, electricity, gas, water, probably $600 total to get everything switched over without an interruption. I don't have $600, Ellen said. Her voice was small, stripped of the anger, leaving only the naked fear beneath. I don't have it. The checking account is empty. Maddie whipped her head around to look at Mom. The phone in her hand lowered completely. What do you mean you don't have it? Maddie asked, her voice rising in panic. Mom, you said we were fine. You said we had the emergency fund. I spent the cash on the wine tour tickets, Ellen stammered, looking at the floor. And the groceries for the welcome dinner. I thought Phoebe would be here. I thought she was just throwing a tantrum. I didn't think she would actually leave us in the dark. Maddie stared at her mother. But the investment, the capital. I watched the exchange. A piece of the puzzle clicked into place. What exactly did Mom promise you? Maddie, I asked. When she told you to come home for support, what did she say? Maddie looked at me, then back at Ellen. She said Dad left money. She said there was an insurance payout she had been saving, $30,000. She said she would use it to invest in Trent's business so we could get back on our feet. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat. It was a dark, sharp thing. $30,000, I repeated. I reached into my portfolio again. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a spreadsheet I had created 3 weeks after Dad died. Twist number 1, I said, sliding the paper across the counter toward Maddie. Dad's life insurance policy was for $40,000, not $100, not $50, $40. Maddie picked up the paper. Her eyes scanned the rows. Look at line 4, I said. Funeral expenses, $12,000. Mom wanted the solid mahogany casket and the catered wake for 200 people. Look at line 6. Roof repair, $15,000. The roof was leaking into the attic. Remember, we had to fix it to make the house livable. I pointed to the bottom of the page. The rest went to property taxes for that first year and Mom's heart medication, which is not cheap. That money was gone 4 years ago. Maddie, every cent of it. Maddie looked up, her face pale. There is no $30,000. There is $0, I said. There is actually negative money. If you count the credit card debt. Maddie turned slowly to Ellen. Mom, you lied to us. Ellen began to weep. She covered her face with her hands. I just wanted you to come home. I missed you. I thought if you came back, we could figure it out. I thought. You thought what? I asked, stepping closer. What was the plan? Mom, if there was no money, how were you going to fund Trent's startup? Ellen sobbed, her shoulders shaking. I thought Phoebe would help. Help how? I pressed. I was already paying all the bills. I didn't have $30,000 lying around. Ellen looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. I was going to charge you rent. The room went dead silent. Even Trent stopped shifting. Rent, I said. For the basement, Ellen whispered, the truth finally leaking out like pus from a wound. I figured, if you moved to the basement, it would be like a separate apartment. I could charge you market rate, maybe $1,200 a month, and since you are family, you would pay it to help your sister. That money, that would be the investment. I stared at her. I had thought I was immune to the pain by now. I thought I had cauterized the wound. But hearing that her grand plan for family support was to force me into a dungeon and then charge me for the privilege, just to funnel my earnings to Maddie, it took my breath away. It was so calculated. It was so predatory. So, I said, my voice quiet. The plan was for me to live in the dark, in the cold, pay you rent for a house I already fixed up, so you could give my money to Maddie and Trent to play business. It was temporary, Ellen cried, just until they got on their feet. You have a good job. Phoebe, you don't have kids. You don't have expenses. You could afford it. I don't have expenses. I laughed. I don't have expenses because I don't have a life. Mom, because I gave it to you. Maddie looked sick. She looked from Mom to me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of realization in her eyes. She realized she wasn't the golden child. She was just another parasite, and the host had just died. That is sick, Mom, Maddie muttered. That is actually twisted. Don't you judge me, Ellen snapped at her. I did it for you. I did it to get you home. And now I am here, Maddie shouted. And we are broke, and we have no furniture, and Trent's investors are going to laugh at us. Wait, Trent said, raising a hand. The credit card. There is a joint credit card. Mom said we could use it for emergencies. I smiled. It was the smile of an executioner. Twist number 2, I said. I reached into the bag one last time. I pulled out the confirmation letter from the bank. The joint credit card, I said, holding it up. The one Ellen opened 2 years ago by guilting me into signing the paperwork. The one you used, Trent, to buy that tablet sitting on the counter. $800 at TechZone. Right? Trent went pale. I called the bank on Friday, I said. I reported the authorized user activity as concerning. I froze the account, and then I paid off the balance in full from my own savings to clear my name, and then I closed it. I ripped the paper in half. It is dead, I said. The card in your wallet is a piece of plastic. Try to swipe it. Go ahead. Go to the gas station and try to buy a pack of gum. It will decline. Ellen made a sound like a wounded animal. Phoebe, how could you? That was our lifeline. That was my neck, I said. And you were strangling me with it. I looked at the 3 of them, the mother who wanted to harvest me, the sister who wanted to displace me, the brother-in-law who wanted to spend me. They were standing in an empty kitchen, in a house they could not afford, with no lights, no water, and no money. So here is the reality, I said. You have a house. It is a nice house, I know, because I built it, but a house costs money. The mortgage is due on the 1st. The property tax is due in November. The utilities will be off by noon tomorrow. I pointed to the door. You wanted to be the heads of the household, I said. Congratulations. You are in charge. Figure it out. Phoebe, wait, Ellen pleaded, stumbling forward, reaching for my arm. You can't leave us like this. We will starve. I stepped back, out of her reach. You won't starve, I said. You have a car. You have clothes. You have that iPad Maddie is holding. Sell them. Get jobs. Do what everyone else in the world does. I am your mother, Ellen screamed. Then start acting like an adult, I said. I turned my back on them. The image of them, Ellen broken. Maddie horrified. Trent calculating his losses was burned into my retina. It was a tragic image. But it was not my tragedy anymore. I walked down the hallway. The echoes of my footsteps were different now. They didn't sound lonely. They sounded like a gavel coming down. Phoebe, Maddie yelled after me. Where are you going? I didn't answer. I walked out the door and into the cool evening air. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn I used to pay to have mowed. I got into my car. I looked at the house one last time. It was just wood and brick. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. As I shifted into drive and headed toward the highway, toward Ridgeview Crossing, toward my life, I felt the last heavy chain snap. I was free. The silence in the kitchen following my revelation about the dead credit card and the non-existent insurance money was heavy enough to crack the quartz countertops. I watched the reality sink into my mother's skin, the arrogance, the entitlement, the towering, righteous indignation. It all evaporated, leaving behind a trembling, terrified woman sitting on a rusty folding chair in an empty room. For years, Ellen had looked at me with a mixture of pity and disdain. I was the boring daughter. I was the one with the spreadsheets and the sensible shoes. I was the background noise to Madison's Technicolor Symphony. But in that moment, as the sun dipped lower outside the window and the shadows lengthened across the bare floor, the power dynamic in the room flipped so violently I almost felt the wind of it. Ellen stood up. Her legs were shaking. She did not look like the matriarch who had banished me to the basement 24 hours ago. She looked like a drowning woman realizing I was the only life raft in the ocean. Phoebe, she whispered. Her voice wavered, stripped of its usual command. Phoebe, wait. She crossed the distance between us in 2 strides and grabbed my hands. Her grip was clammy and desperate. Tears were already spilling over her cheeks, ruining the powder she had applied for the wine tour. Please, she sobbed. You cannot mean that. You cannot just leave us here with nothing. I am sorry. Okay, I am so sorry. I was stressed. I wasn't thinking clearly. We can fix this. I looked down at her hands clutching mine. They were the same hands that had pointed to the basement door. They were the same hands that had signed my name to a credit card without asking. We can fix it, Ellen babbled, squeezing tighter, her eyes darting frantically over my face, searching for the soft spot she had exploited for a decade. I will make it up to you. I promise. I will be better. I will listen to you. We can change the arrangement. Maddie can pay. Yes, Maddie and Trent can get jobs, and they can pay the bills. You don't have to pay anything. Just come back. Bring the furniture back. Turn the lights back on. Please, Phoebe, don't leave your mother alone in the dark. I listened to her words, dissecting them with the cold precision of a logistics manager. I will be better. Maddie can pay. Turn the lights back on. She was not apologizing for hurting me. She was not apologizing for devaluing my existence or trying to displace me from my own home. She was apologizing because the invoice had come due and she was insolvent. She was not missing her daughter. She was missing her sponsor. It was a horrifying realization. The love she was offering me right now was conditional. It was a transaction. She was offering me affection in exchange for solvency. You are hurting my hands, I said quietly. Ellen recoiled, as if I had burned her, dropping my hands. She wiped her face, leaving streaks of mascara on her cheeks. I am begging you, she whimpered. Does that mean nothing to you? I am your mother. It means you are afraid, I said. And I understand why. Being an adult is terrifying when you have spent your whole life pretending the bills pay themselves. From her perch on the plastic crate, Maddie made a noise of disgust. She stood up, her face flushed not with shame, but with a defensive, spiteful anger. She could not handle the humiliation of being exposed as a leech. So she did what she always did. She attacked. God, you are enjoying this, aren't you? Maddie spat. She threw her hands up, gesturing at the empty kitchen. Look at you, standing there so high and mighty. You have always been jealous of me. Phoebe, always. You hate that I took risks. You hate that I have a life that people actually care about. You are just a bitter, boring logistics clerk, and you love seeing us struggle because it makes you feel important. Trent looked at his wife, clearly alarmed by her strategy, but he said nothing. He just kept tapping his foot nervously against the island. I turned my gaze to Maddie. 5 years ago, her words would have cut me to the bone. I would have retreated, apologized, and done anything to prove I was not the jealous, bitter sister. Today, her words just sounded like noise. Jealous? I asked, tilting my head slightly. Maddie, if I wanted to see you struggle, I would have stopped paying the mortgage 3 years ago. I would have let the bank foreclose on this house while you were posting brunch photos in Lakeshore. I would have let Mom call you crying for money you didn't have. I took a step toward her. I kept this house perfect for you, I said. I kept Mom off your back. I paid for the safety net you used to bounce back every time you failed. If that is jealousy, then I am the worst at it in history. Then why are you doing this? Maddie screamed, tears of frustration welling in her eyes. Why are you burning it all down? I am not burning it down, I said calmly. I am giving you exactly what you asked for. You wanted to be the head of the household. You wanted the master suite. You wanted to build a life here without my interference. You called me a burden. You said I was in the way. I gestured to the empty room. This is what independence looks like, Maddie, I said. It is empty until you fill it. It is dark until you pay for the light. You wanted a life without the boring sister congratulations. You have it. Ellen let out a wail. A sharp, wounded sound. She saw that Maddie's attack had failed, so she reached for the weapon that never missed. She reached for the ghost. Your father would be ashamed of you, Ellen shrieked, her face twisting into a mask of grief. If George were here, oh my God, if he saw you walking out on your family on his house, he would be sick. He told you to take care of me. His last words were, take care of your mom, and you are throwing me to the wolves. The air in the room seemed to freeze. The name hung there, heavy and sacred. George. For 5 years. That name had been the chain around my neck. Every time I wanted to buy a new dress, I heard his voice. Every time I wanted to leave, I felt the weight of his request. Ellen had used his memory as a police officer, a judge, and a jailer. I felt a lump form in my throat. The tears pricked my eyes, hot and sudden. But they were not tears of guilt. They were tears of clarity. I looked at the spot on the floor where Dad and I used to sit and eat sandwiches during the renovation. I remembered his rough hands. I remembered his laugh. I remembered how he taught me to measure twice and cut once. He was a man who respected work. He was a man who believed in earning your keep. You are right, I said, my voice shaking slightly before steadying into steel. Dad would be ashamed. Ellen nodded eagerly, thinking she had won. Yes, he would, so fix it. Phoebe. He would be ashamed, I continued, looking directly into her eyes. If he saw his wife kicking the daughter who built this house into a basement, he would be ashamed if he saw you spending his life insurance money on wine tours and lies. He would be ashamed that you raised a daughter who thinks she is too good to work and another daughter who you treated like a servant. Ellen's mouth fell open. She looked as if I had slapped her. I kept my promise, I said. I took care of you for 5 years. I gave you a home. I gave you dignity. But Dad never asked me to set myself on fire so you could stay warm. And he certainly never asked me to let you destroy me. I walked over to the counter where I had left the stack of receipts. I reached into my bag and pulled out a second envelope. This one was thick, brown, and official. I placed it on the quartz surface next to the spare key. You always told me I was lucky to live here rent-free, I said. You said I didn't know what it meant to carry the load. Well, Mom, you are right. It is time for you to carry it. What is that? Trent asked, his voice hoarse. That, I said, is the handover. I tapped the envelope. Inside is a copy of the mortgage agreement. I highlighted the account number and the routing number for the bank. The payment is due on the first of every month. It is $1,240. If you are late, there is a $50 fee. If you are 30 days late, they report it to the credit bureau. If you are 90 days late, they start foreclosure proceedings. Maddie made a choking sound. Also included, I went on, relentless, is the property tax schedule. The county assessment is due in November. That is usually around $4,000. I have also included the contact information for the plumber we use, the electrician who knows the wiring, and the schedule for the trash pickup. I looked at Ellen. Everything I have handled silently for 5 years is in that envelope, I said. Every worry, every deadline, every bill, it is yours now, all of it. Maddie scrambled off the crate and grabbed the envelope. She ripped it open, pulling out the papers. She stared at the numbers, her eyes widening in horror. $1,200, she squeaked. Plus utilities, plus taxes. That is like $2,000 a month just to exist here. Welcome to homeownership, I said. We can't pay this, Trent said, his voice rising an octave. He looked at Maddie, panic breaking through his cool facade. Babe, we have maybe $300 left in the joint account, and my investors, they are not calling back. We can't pay this. Mom, Maddie looked at Ellen. You have to have something, a retirement account, Social Security. Ellen shook her head slowly, staring at the floor. The Social Security check covers the car payment and the groceries. There is nothing left over, nothing. The silence that followed was absolute. The three of them stood there, the math of their survival crushing them in real time. They were looking at the numbers, and for the first time, the numbers were not magically disappearing. You have 2 choices, I said. They all looked at me. Choice 1, I said. You sell the house. The market is good. You could probably get enough equity out of it to pay off the debts and rent a small 2-bedroom apartment for a year. It won't be glamorous. You won't have a master suite. But you will have a roof. Ellen let out a sob. Sell the house. My home. Choice 2, I said. You grow up. I looked at Maddie. Starbucks is hiring. I saw the sign. It pays $15 an hour. It is boring work. It is hard on your feet, but it pays money. I looked at Trent. The warehouse in Ridgeview is looking for forklift operators. It is the night shift. It is dirty, but it comes with benefits. I am an entrepreneur, Trent protested weakly. I can't drive a forklift. Then you can be a homeless entrepreneur, I said, because those are your options. There is no third option where Phoebe comes back and writes a check. That version of me does not exist anymore. I adjusted the strap of my bag on my shoulder. I felt light. I felt tall. I am leaving now, I said. Ellen lurched forward, her face contorted with a mix of rage and grief. She realized the guilt trip hadn't worked. She realized the begging hadn't worked. So she fired the only bullet she had left. If you walk out that door, she screamed, her voice echoing off the bare walls. You are not my daughter. Do you hear me? If you leave us like this, you are dead to me. Don't you dare call me. Don't you dare come back for Christmas. You are nothing to me. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. 5 years ago, that sentence would have destroyed me. It was the thing I had been running from my entire life, the fear of rejection, the fear of being cast out. But standing there in the empty hallway, I listened to the words echo, and I realized something. She wasn't threatening me with exile. She was threatening me with freedom. She was saying I didn't have to come back for Christmas. She was saying I didn't have to call. She was saying I was released from the contract. I turned back one last time. I looked at my mother, small and angry and terrified in the ruin of her own making. You know, Mom, I said softly, I used to be so afraid you would say that. I opened the door. The cool evening air rushed in, smelling of pine and rain. But hearing it now, I said, it sounds like the nicest thing you have ever done for me. I stepped out onto the porch and closed the door. The latch clicked shut. It was a solid, heavy sound. The sound of a vault closing, the sound of a book ending. I walked to my car, my keys jingling in my hand, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look back to see if they were watching. I didn't care. I turned my back on the kitchen. It was a simple movement, just a pivot of my heel on the hardwood floor, but it felt like the rotation of a heavy iron lock finally clicking into place. I walked down the hallway that led to the front door. The air in the house felt different now. For 5 years, this hallway had been a tunnel of obligation, lined with the runner rug I had bought to protect the floors, decorated with the console table where I left my keys and my checkbook. Now, it was just a corridor of bare wood. I looked down at the floorboards. I could see the faint scratches and scuffs that the rug had hidden. I saw the imperfections. I saw the raw reality of the structure. My footsteps echoed with a sharp, hollow sound, a clack, clack, clack that bounced off the empty walls. It sounded like a judge banging a gavel. It sounded like the final punctuation mark at the end of a very long, very painful chapter of a book I was no longer writing. I reached the front door and put my hand on the cold brass knob. I paused. I did not pause because I was hesitating. I paused because I wanted to listen. Behind me, the kitchen had dissolved into chaos. I could hear the sounds of their reality crashing down around them. Ellen was crying, a jagged, heaving sound that was partly genuine fear and partly a performance for an audience that had already left the building. I heard Maddie cursing, her voice shrill and ugly, stripping away the polished influencer veneer she wore for the internet. "This is insane," Maddie was screaming. "She cannot do this, Trent. Do something, call a lawyer." I heard Trent's voice, low and frantic, trying to reason with two women who were immune to logic. "Maddie, a lawyer costs money. We don't have a retainer. Look at the dates on these papers. The disconnect is tomorrow. We need to figure out the water situation." They were trapped. They were standing in the middle of the family support they had demanded, and they were realizing that without me, support was just a word people used to describe a structure that could not stand on its own. They were 3 adults stuck in a hollow box that they had assumed was a fortress of safety, only to find out the safety was a person, and that person had just resigned. I did not turn around. I just spoke, pitching my voice loud enough to carry down the empty hallway, clear and unwavering. "You wanted space," I called out. "Now you have all of it. What you do with it is no longer my problem." I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. The evening air was cool and sweet, smelling of damp earth and the pine trees that lined the street. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that didn't taste like anxiety. As I walked down the front steps, I looked toward the end of the street. A white utility truck was idling at the corner, its orange safety lights flashing slowly in the twilight. The logo on the side was for the County Power Company. I did not know if they were there for my request. It was technically scheduled for the next morning, or if they were just doing routine maintenance. But seeing that truck there, a sentinel of consequences, felt like a metaphor the universe had painted just for me. The light was a service. It was a commodity. I had been the one keeping the darkness at bay for 5 years. I had been the human generator, burning my own energy to keep their lives bright and comfortable. Now, the generator was gone. The light they had was the only light they were going to get. "Phoebe." The scream came from the doorway behind me. I stopped halfway to my car. Ellen had run out onto the porch. She was clutching the doorframe with one hand, her other hand gripping the fabric of her dress. Her face was a mask of pure desperation, contorted by the terror of a woman watching her safety net drive away. "You are killing this family," she screamed, her voice cracking on the last word. "You are killing us." It was the ultimate accusation. It was the weapon she had saved for the very end, the one designed to pierce the heart of the dutiful daughter. I turned around. I did not walk back to her. I stood by the door of my car. my hand on the handle. I looked at her across the expanse of the lawn I used to pay to maintain. "I just stopped letting you kill me for it," I said. I did not wait for her response. There was nothing she could say that would change the math. I got into my car. I pulled the door shut. The sound of the door sealing was profound. It was a dull thud that cut off the sound of her crying. It cut off the sound of the wind. It created a vacuum of silence that belonged only to me. I put the key in the ignition. My hand was trembling. It was a fine, high-frequency tremor, the kind that comes after a massive release of adrenaline. But underneath the shaking, there was a firmness I had never felt before. My grip on the wheel was solid. I started the engine. I put the car in reverse. I backed out of the driveway of the house on Maple Ridge for the last time. I shifted into drive and began to move slowly down the street. I drove past the neighbors' houses. I passed the corner where I had learned to ride a bicycle with my father running behind me. I passed the patch of grass where I used to sit and read while avoiding the chaos inside. I passed the driveway where I had unloaded thousands of bags of groceries, carrying them inside to fill a refrigerator for people who never asked how I paid for them. I looked at these places through the windshield, and they looked like a movie set being dismantled. They were two-dimensional. They were part of a story that had already ended. On the passenger seat next to me, my phone began to vibrate. It buzzed against the leather seat. A harsh, insistent sound. I glanced at the screen. It was Maddie. "Please pick up. We are sorry. Don't be a psycho." Then a text from Trent. "Phoebe, be reasonable. Just pay for this month. Give us 30 days. Then Ellen again. I am your mother. You owe me. You owe me respect." Then the tone shifted. The threats evaporated, replaced by the naked bargaining of desperate people. "Just until we figure it out. Please, we don't have cash for food." I stared at the messages scrolling across the lock screen. For a moment, the old reflex kicked in. The muscle memory of fixing things twitched in my brain. I could transfer $500. I could call the power company and extend the service for a week. I could send them a pizza. It would be so easy to make the buzzing stop by giving them what they wanted. But then I thought about the basement. I thought about the damp, cold concrete floor Ellen had tried to banish me to. I thought about the rent she planned to charge me to live in my own house. I thought about the lies. I reached over. I picked up the phone. I did not unlock it. I flipped the silence switch on the side. Then, I turned it face down on the seat. The buzzing continued, muffled now against the upholstery. But I stopped looking at it. That was the biggest decision of my life. It was not driving away. It was deciding that their emergency was no longer my emergency. It was allowing their call to fall into the void. I drove onto the highway, merging into the traffic heading toward Ridgeview Crossing. As the miles put distance between me and Maple Ridge, the trembling in my hands stopped. When I walked into my apartment 40 minutes later, it was completely dark. I had not left a light on. I fumbled for the switch on the wall, and the living room flooded with soft, yellow light. It illuminated the boxes I still hadn't unpacked. It illuminated the mismatched space where my furniture was crammed in. I walked over to the bookshelf where I had placed my father's red metal tool chest. It was heavy, scratched, and smelled of oil and sawdust. It was the only thing I had taken that didn't have a receipt. But it had a cost. I unlatched the metal clasps. They snapped open with a satisfying metallic sound. I opened the lid. Inside, the tools were arranged exactly as he had left them. The hammer with the taped handle, the level with the dried mud on the side, the old tape measure. I picked up the tape measure. I held it in my hand, feeling the weight of it. I ran my thumb over the metal casing. I remembered the day we measured the kitchen for the new cabinets. I remembered Dad teaching me how to read the tiny lines, how to account for the width of the blade. I remembered him telling me that a house is only as strong as its measurements. For a long time, I thought the house was the legacy. I thought the walls and the roof and the quartz countertops were the things that held his spirit. I thought that by keeping the house perfect, I was keeping him alive. But standing there in my generic corporate apartment, holding his tape measure, I realized I had been wrong. The house was just wood. It was just brick. It was static. The legacy was the work. The legacy was the grit. The legacy was the fact that I knew how to fix a leak. I knew how to negotiate a contract. I knew how to budget a paycheck. I knew how to endure a 10-hour shift and still come home and paint a wall. I was the builder. Ellen and Maddie and Trent. They were just the tenants. They consumed. They occupied. But they did not build. They could keep the shell of the house, but they could not keep the thing that made it a home. They could not keep me. I put the tape measure back in the box and closed the lid. I went to the kitchen and turned on the espresso machine. The hum was loud in the quiet apartment. I frothed the milk. I pulled the shot. I made a cappuccino. Just for me. I walked back into the living room and sat down on my Italian leather sofa. It took up too much space in the small room, but it was comfortable. I took a sip of the coffee. It was perfect. My phone was still on the table by the door. It vibrated again and again. The screen lit up the entryway for a brief second before going dark. I looked at it, and then I looked away. I looked at the lamp in the corner. I had paid the electric bill for this apartment yesterday. The light was steady, it was bright, and it was mine. For the first time in my life, the panic was on the other side of the door. It was screaming. It was begging. It was clawing at the wood, trying to find a way in. But I had the key, and I was not opening it. I took another sip of coffee, leaned back against the cushions, and let the silence wrap around me like a warm blanket. The story of Phoebe the doormat was over. The story of Phoebe the builder had just begun. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Maya Revenge Stories. I would love to know where in the world you are tuning in from. So please drop your location in the comments below so we can say hello. If you enjoyed watching Phoebe take back her power, please make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people who might need to hear it.